Here on the esteemed Dzeeff channel, I rarely report on the news when cards actually get first announced, specifically because I like to have some time to sort of mull over what the card can do, not only in its archetype, but also in some like crazier decks. And that's kind of what happened when the recent drop of the Link of Reigns OCG pack, which I believe we're getting in February of 2018, right around Valentine's Day. It's Konami's Valentine's letter to us. But there were 6 new cards that were announced, and I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'm only focusing on the Burning Abyss one in this video. So we have a Cliffort one, a Gladiator Beast one, Lightsworn, Burning Abyss, Kristan, although that one's not, it's more just like generic synchro support, and then a Heretic. I will probably talk about the Lightsworn and Heretic one at some point, but for today's video, I wanted to focus on the Burning Abyss one. I'm obviously one of the biggest Burning Abyss fans of all time, maybe. I've played it, honestly, I've continued to play it during Link format, casually at least. I've built Skyforge Fluffle Burning Abyss, updated for Link Summoning, and I've also built Phantom Knight Burning Abyss, and then obviously I tried really hard to get my friend Max's deck profile of the Orbital Burning Abyss, which is still a really cool list. But anyway, let's take a look at this effect and its stats and all that jazz, and then we're going to talk about some of the maybe not so obvious and some of the more conventional uses for this card. So it's a Link 2 monster, and that's awesome. Actually, of the 6 cards released, 5 of them are Link 2s, and 6 of them all have, so every single one has a bottom left and bottom right arrow, which is the best spot for arrows just in general. The Lightsworn one is the only one that goes against the Link 2. It's a Link 3, and it also has an up-pointing arrow like Decode Talker. But overall, I'm glad that happens. I'm glad I didn't mess around that formula too much. I think they're sort of in a weird spot where those arrows are just like automatically the best ones. This one would have been kind of cool if it also had like an arrow pointing left or right, so that when you revived it with Seer, it actually got arrows, but that's not super important because I definitely wouldn't want a Link 3 monster. But all this thing takes is 2 level 3 monsters, and we'll get to that in a second. A big portion of why this card is powerful is because it can be made with so many different good monsters. It only has 500 attack. That's not that big a deal, and mainly the reason it has 500 attack is because this card would be absurd if it didn't. It has 3 effects. So the first card effect is that monsters this card points to cannot be destroyed by card effects. That's sort of like a mini Fiendish Rhino, but it also makes this card just really dumb at protecting cards like Beatrice and really just anything. And then also, obviously, just like Fiendish Rhino, it's going to protect your Burning Abyss monsters from blowing up if you control a non-Burning Abyss monster. Now, thank God, because this card actually is a Burning Abyss monster. There were a lot of people, myself included, that were very worried that Konami would give us a card like Beatrice that wasn't a Burning Abyss monster, but luckily this card is a Burning Abyss monster. Still, the sort of protection effect is helpful if you want to make any other Exceed monsters, or if you want to have like a Vanity's Feet next to it or something where you're not restricted to only Burning Abyss cards while it's face up on the field. Next, if this card on the field would be destroyed by battle or your opponent's card effects, you can send 1 card you control to the graveyard instead. So that's sort of like it's a better and a worse Proxy Dragon effect, if that makes sense. It's better because it can send cards from anywhere in the field, not just what it points to. It's worse because it only works on protecting itself. I think that effect is good. It's not great. I think it's best for protecting itself to keep the third effect live turn after turn, and then also to trigger Burning Abyss effects. Not terrible, not great, but it's definitely helpful. The main effect here, besides the fact that this card is letting you play Link monsters in Burning Abyss, the main effect, though, is that its third effect is insane. So once per turn, you can send 1 level 3 monster from your deck to the graveyard, then target 1 Burning Abyss monster you control, increase that target's attack and defense by the attack and defense of the sent monster until the end of the turn. That's incredible. It really is. It makes this card really dumb, pretty much. The ruling that I've seen is that you can target itself, even though Link monsters do not have defense points. I don't want to confirm or deny that, but if that is true, this card's really good, because then it works as like then this card turns like anytime you can make a rank 3 into a Firewall Dragon, which I guess we should probably talk about So the next category of things that I wanted to discuss were two things. So the first thing is the best cards to make this with, and the second thing is the best cards to send with its effect. Now, not all of these are going to be super obvious. I'd actually argue many of these are not obvious. So the obvious one to make it is Tour Guide. Tour Guide is fantastic for getting this card, but more importantly, you want to make this thing with Fiendish Rhino Warrior, because anytime you can make this card using Fiendish Rhino Warrior, you instantly have another rank 3, because you can send the Fiendish Rhino Warrior ditches Graf special Skarm, and then you use the Burning Abyss Link Monsters effect to send Seer, bring back the Graf, make a Dante. That's a really strong play. In my opinion, Fiendish Rhino Warrior is like the go-to thing you want to make this with. I don't know if it's going to make that card a 3 of, but it's definitely something that you want to open like at all times. So Tour Guide is good specifically because it's your extra copy of Fiendish Rhino Warrior. Obviously, another good one is the Phantom Knights. That's not super surprising, except that the important thing here is that when you summon this thing using Phantom Knights, it puts both the Phantom Knights in the graveyard, so you can instantly use both of their effects. In the past, when you've used Phantom Knights for Exceed monsters, you usually just attach the boots and get the Trap Search, and it leaves the cloak or gloves waiting around until the following turn to actually get its effect. In this case, though, you instantly have the opportunity to use both of their search effects, which I think is really good, and I think it'll make PK Fire, although people don't call it that deck anymore because that is a pretty cringy name, to be honest. But the Phantom Knight Burning Abyss deck becomes a lot more viable now that you have this card that can instantly trigger 2 effects. Also, a card that you might not be thinking about is Sayin. Sayin, you can then grab a card with its effect. Most likely you'll be grabbing a Hand Trap of some sort, Ash Blossom, as well as Max C. Both seem like pretty good options, as well as Ghost Reaper, to be completely honest, although that's probably more metagame dependent, and especially if you're going first, I don't know if you'd keep Ghost Reaper in the matchup, but Ash Blossom and Max C seem pretty viable, pretty similar to what people thought Sayin would be used in terms of Metal Foes. When Sayin went to 3, a lot of people were saying, well, why don't you just play it in Metal Foes? Pretty good card there. You search Max C. But I think for now, this is actually a decent use for Sayin. You can grab Sayin with Skarm if you need to, and then it's really good. Because obviously Sayin won't use it. Trigger its effect off of Exceed Summons, and you can use it for Synchros, but there aren't a lot of Synchros around right now. But for Link Summons, it's pretty primed to actually get that effect. So I like that choice. So those are sort of like the main things that you'd be summoning this with. Some others would be the Preda Plants. I don't know if... I made that build of Burning Abyss with Brilliant Fusion earlier, I think 2 months ago, and that's sort of like a lot more viable now, because with one Preda Plant, you can get to the Link Monster and Brilliant Fusion, and then you have the Foolish Burial effect for Graf or whatever, which is just really strong. So that's actually very appealing. At this point, Galaxy Worm is also very good. Probably not Speedroid Terratop unless that goes to like 2 or 3, but Galaxy Worm is sort of like a mini Terratop. It takes your normal summon, but it doesn't have like a brick draw, so it has its advantages and disadvantages. Well, that's pretty much covers everything for what you want to summon with it, or what you want to summon it with. Now for what you want to send. So the obvious choice that I mentioned like 100 times now is Graf. Fiendish Rhino also works if you didn't draw it. But Graf, Seer, Skarm, all the Burning Abyss cards are pretty good. And Barbar actually is good too, because the 1700 attack points is pretty crazy when you can boost a monster by that. One of the problems with Burning Abyss in the past is that it does have trouble getting over monsters with 2500 attack points. That's what Dante and Virgil cap out on. And outside of Farfa, which doesn't even permanently deal with the monster, Acid Golem is like the best way to get over big monsters, but then you're restricted with your summons. So sending Barbar increases your monster's attack by a lot. That seems like a pretty good play. The one that a lot of people are thinking of, though, is Dandelion. Dandelion's very good. Assuming that you can use the effect of the Link Monster on itself, which I personally don't see a reason why you wouldn't be able to. Assuming that is true, then anytime you can summon 2 level 3 monsters, you can make an instant Link 4 monster just by getting rid of them both and then sending a Dandelion. Dandelion puts 2 tokens on the board, sending you 2 tokens and a Link 2. Instant Link 4 monster. I don't think that's actually that good a play in Burning Abyss, because Fireball Dragon doesn't really do anything, but just in general, it's good to keep on sort of the back burner of what the possibilities for this card would be. You could also just do other things with the Dandelion token, such as make like Proxy Dragon, although I'm not sure that's impactful enough to actually warrant running the Dandelion. The other cool thing is Tour Bus from the Underworld. This card really hasn't seen a lot of play outside of when it was originally released, and people used it in windups to make their combo even more extended, and even then people ended up dropping it because it wasn't consistent enough. But I think that Tour Bus is sort of worthwhile in a Burning Abyss deck, just because you can now just send it straight to the graveyard with the Link monster, and then recycle the tour guide that you use to summon the Link monster, probably. I don't know if that plays like amazing, but it is, I think, interesting at the very least. You'd only have to play one Tour Bus, and that gives you that extra tour guide activation. I think the biggest problem with that is that tour guide is kind of unsafe right now just because of Ash Blossom. It gets instantly, I mean, if your tour guide gets Ash Blossomed, your turn is basically just over. It's a lot of time just safer to grab Burning Abyss monsters with Skarm. But if Ash Blossom ever gets set on the ban list, or if people ever stop playing Ash Blossom, which I'm sure will happen eventually, Tour Bus seems pretty good. And then there's like some really random ones. The two that I came up with were Necrogardna and Unizombie. Both of those are pretty fringe. Necrogardna obviously hasn't seen a lot of play, and sending Unizombie doesn't seem like the worst thing ever. At the very least, it makes a deck like Burning Abyss Zombies with Brilliant Fusion a little more versatile. I don't know if that's like the best deck ever. It seems interesting at the very least just to like summon Cypher Lord Omega and then use it to recycle stuff that you banished with Barbar. But the cool thing with that, if that does become a deck, or it becomes a deck that I build at some point, anytime that if you like mill a Mizuki, you can then just send the Unizombie to the grave and get your combos going. So that's kind of cool. But overall, I'm really happy with this card. It basically does everything I would want it to. I think the only thing that I would want it to do more would be special summon a level 3 guy from your hand. But I think at this point, seeing the other effects of this card, that'd just be way too good. But let me know what you guys think about the new Burning Abyss Link monster, and also if you want me to talk about any of the other ones. I probably do have plans to talk about the Herratic one, because I love Herratics, and also the Lightsworn one, because I feel it's really bad, but we'll get to that another time. I'll see you guys later. Bye.